All right, let's dive right into this explainer where we're going to break down the rules and the scorekeeping of business partnerships. I mean, nothing ruins a great friendship quite like a misunderstood profit-sharing ratio, right? So if you're fascinated by how businesses actually function behind the scenes, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we're going to decode the financial DNA of what exactly happens when two or more people decide to join forces.
It's a genuine question. While going solo as an entrepreneur is incredibly popular, it's often limited by a lack of capital, restricted managerial ability, and intensely high personal risk. Bringing in a partner solves those scale and capital issues beautifully, but it simultaneously introduces some really complex financial dynamics that require strict, highly specific accounting rules. Without these rules, that shared check we talked about can quickly become a battleground. So let's look at how to actually keep the peace.
Here is our roadmap for today. First up, defining business partnerships, followed by the partnership deed, the default rules of 1932, tracking partner capital, fixed versus fluctuating capital, and finally, what happens when partnerships end.
Section 1. Defining business partnerships. Let's start with the basics of what actually constitutes a partnership in the eyes of the law, specifically looking through the lens of the Indian Partnership Act of 1932. At its very core, a partnership is built entirely on mutual agreement. It's basically a relationship where two or more persons agree to share the capital, the management, the risk, and the profits of a business. Individually, they're called partners, but collectively, the law recognizes them as a firm, and they act in this dual capacity, meaning each partner is both a principal of the firm and an agent acting on behalf of the others. Now, one absolutely crucial feature you've got to understand here is this concept of unlimited liabilities. In a standard partnership, liability is joint and several. What does that actually mean for you? Well, it means partners are personally liable right down to the last rupee in their pocket if the business assets fall short. So if the firm cannot pay its debts, creditors can and absolutely will come after your personal private property. It is a massive financial commitment.
Section 2. The partnership deed.
To manage all that immense risk and keep the peace, partners need a rock-solid rulebook. By law, a partnership is the result of an agreement, and technically speaking, that agreement can just be oral. But let's be real, a handshake is not going to save you in court. Having a formal, written partnership deed is undeniably the best way to avoid disputes. It explicitly regulates the rights, duties, and liabilities of everyone involved, forming the undeniable basis of your mutual relationship.
This deed dictates the exact terms of your financial relationship. It prevents those classic co-founder fights by explicitly stating who puts in what and who takes out what. It spells out the profit-sharing ratio, exact capital contributions, and even things like whether your partner gets a salary for running the day-to-day operations while you just sit back. It is the ultimate internal management playbook for the firm.
Section 3. Default rules of 1932.
But hey, what if you and your partner just completely forget to write these crucial details down? Or maybe you just relied on a handshake? Well, if your deed is silent on these points, the Indian Partnership Act of 1932 steps in and acts as the ultimate default rulebook. And honestly, its rules are pretty brutal if you aren't prepared. Even if you put in 90% of the capital and do 90% of the work, without a written deed, the Act enforces an equal 50-50 profit sharing. It also strictly denies any salaries or commissions for extra work and completely prohibits paying out interest on the capital you invested.
Furthermore, the Act has a very specific default rule regarding loans. Let's say you provide an additional amount to the business as a loan, above and beyond your required capital, and you forgot to specify the interest rate in your deed. The Act automatically defaults to a strict 6% per annum interest rate. No more, no less.
Section 4. Tracking partner capital.
Now that we know the rules, let's see how this builds into the actual scorekeeping. In accounting, capital isn't just some vague concept of overall worth. It is the specific amount a partner brings in to manage business activities. Importantly, this can be in cash or it can be in kind. This means a partner might bring in actual physical assets, like office computers, a delivery van, or raw inventory, instead of just handing over cash. Every single asset or rupee must be meticulously tracked to ensure absolute fairness.
Section 5. Fixed versus fluctuating capital. To track this capital over the years without making a total mess of the ledgers, accountants use two primary strategic frameworks. You can think of the fixed capital method kind of like a protected savings account that rarely changes. The initial capital stays completely static year after year.
On the other hand, the fluctuating capital method is much more like an all-in-one checking account where everything is just mixed together, meaning the actual capital balance changes or fluctuates every single year based on how the firm performs.
This highlights a really major structural difference between the two approaches. The fixed capital method actually requires you to open a completely separate account called a current account right alongside the main capital account. Conversely, in the fluctuating method, absolutely everything just dumps directly into one single capital account.
Let's dig into that fixed method a bit more because it's super interesting. By funneling all the daily operational adjustments, like the cash partners withdraw for personal use, which we call drawings, plus any salaries, commissions, and annual profit shares, into this separate current account, the main capital base remains perfectly untouched. It creates an incredibly clear, dispute-free historical record of the original investment versus the ongoing operational gains.
Section 6. When partnerships end. Eventually, all things run their course, right? Whether through retirement, a mutual disagreement, or a court order, partnerships end. The firm is dissolved, and the final score has to be settled. But when the firm dissolves and all the assets are sold off, or realized, partners cannot just grab that cash and run. Section 48 of the Act dictates a really strict order of operations. First, the expenses of the dissolution itself are paid. Next, outside debts, like bank loans and third-party creditors, are paid off. Only after every single external liability is entirely cleared do the partners actually see a single rupee of their capital returned to them.
And remember that unlimited liability rule we talked about earlier? Here is exactly where it bites. If, after selling everything, a partner's capital account is in the negative and they don't have the private personal assets to cover it, they are considered an insolvent partner. Because liability is joint and several, the remaining solvent partners must step in and absorb that deficiency. You literally have to pay off the firm's debts from your own personal pockets, divided up in your profit-sharing ratio.
It's a pretty sobering thought, isn't it? The difference between a clean break and a really messy legal battle entirely comes down to whether you tracked these fundamentals correctly from day one. Will your book show fairness or a recipe for a lawsuit? Thank you so much for joining this explainer. I really hope this leaves you thinking about the massive legal and financial stakes hidden right there behind those everyday ledger entries.